Halton as we know it today is rich in history and modern traditions of the many First Nations and the Métis. From the Anishinaabe to the Arawandran, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today on these treaty lands, we have the responsibility to honor and respect the four directions land, waters, plants, animals, ancestors that walked before us, and all the wonderful elements of creation that exist. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for sharing their traditional territory with us.
I firstly recognize that I reside, work, exercise, adventure, and simply live and breathe on the Haudenosaunee territory. I respect the history of the land and the Haudenosaunee people that resided and still reside on it. I acknowledge the Indigenous people who still need reconciliation and their calls to action completed. I commit to learning from Indigenous people about their culture, history, and fight for reconciliation. The land is extremely important to me for many reasons. I am extremely connected to nature and am outside at every opportunity. I love biking, hiking, camping, and exploring nature. I appreciate the land that I live on and thank all of the Indigenous ancestors and people for the land. I hope that everyone begins to recognize the importance of the land, its history, and what we can do to ensure our planet is and Indigenous people are taken care of. Thank you.
I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather today is the traditional ancestral territory of the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe peoples. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties. As we gather on this land today to share, learn, and grow, we understand and honor the rights for our Indigenous brothers and sisters. As Canadians, we recognize and appreciate the history behind the land upon which we stand on, as well as the contributions made by the Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous people in shaping our province and country. Their love and commitment to this country has allowed Canada to become sustainable for many generations to come. We must continue to honor and care for the land. Our many ongoing projects are catered towards creating a positive impact for Indigenous peoples. We continue to persevere and strive towards Indigenous truth and reconciliation within our community. As well, we must be activists against the systems of oppression that are being placed on Indigenous people from their land and their denied human rights. Throughout our meeting today, we remain in solidarity with all our Indigenous peoples across Canada.
I would like to acknowledge the land we reside on, which is the original ancestral territory of the Aadwandurun, Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, and Haudenosaunee First Nations. It is important to acknowledge this land which we work, live, and learn on every day because of the sacrifices and struggles the Indigenous people have faced and continue to face every day. It is important to acknowledge their presence and the rights that have been denied from them, and so I ask today, when we enjoy the wonders of the earth outside, that we are reflective and mindful about the ancestral aspects of this sacred land available to us.
Miigwech. In Ojibwe, that means thank you. I am grateful. I am a biracial settler, and my heritage is mixed from many lands, but primarily from Western Europe and Africa. I grew up in Anishinaabe, Mississaugas territory, and I am grateful to live and work in Oakville and Halton region. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in the history and modern traditions of many First Nations and Métis. From the lands of the Anishinaabe to the Arawandran, the Haudenosaunee, and the Métis, these lands surrounding the Great Lakes are steeped in Indigenous history. As we gather today, although virtually, on these treaty lands, we are in solidarity with our Indigenous brothers and sisters to honor and respect the four directions, which include the lands, waters, plants, animals, and ancestors that walked before us, and all of the wonderful elements of creation. We acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for being stewards of these traditional lands. Miigwech.
We'd like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we gather today. In the region of Halton, it is under the treaty territories of the Mississaugas of the First Credit. For generations, Indigenous people have lived, cared, and loved for this land. In particular, we acknowledge the Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and Chippewa peoples of this territory. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Agreement. We stand united to respect the four directions, waters, plants, lands, animals, and ancestors that walk before us. And for all the challenges that they have faced in the past, we are eternally thankful to have this opportunity to work on this land, and we give our respect and gratitude to its first inhabitants.
As settlers, we're thankful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all generations of people who have taken care of this land for many years. As we gather here, there have been Aboriginal people who have been the stewards of this land. In particular, I would like to acknowledge the Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Ojibwe peoples. We recognize and deeply appreciate their historic connection to this place. We also recognize the contributions of the Métis and Inuit people who have made both in shaping and strengthening this community. As settlers, this recognition of the contributions and historic importance of Indigenous people must be clearly connected to our commitment to make the promise of truth and reconciliation, and in particular to bring justice for residential school survivors and murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls across our country.